Good evening, fellow viewers, and welcome to this special edition of Amber Perspective. Good evening, Raymond, and welcome.
Good evening, Derek, and I want to welcome everybody who is on today for Watch Amber Perspective. I want to welcome everybody who is online. Make us share the link so that more people can join. Make we all be together and watch the show. We want to thank all those who watch you on satellite back on ground zero. Say welcome, and those who are all over the world in the diaspora, want to welcome on all, and yeah, we hope we get a very interesting show today.
Yes, we will be having a special guest today, Mr. Atam Milan, who will be sharing a lot of perspective on the way forward for the struggle. So we are still waiting for his arrival at the studio, but we will begin with the show while waiting for the guest to come through. So Raymond, a lot has happened this week, and because we have a special guest that I want to comment on, I would like us to dive a bit to some of the issues that were coming up before this week. A lot of some of our viewers on Ground Zero were complaining of reception of SCBC. Maybe you want to talk to the technicalities and how people can reinstall back their signals in their homes.
Oh yeah, we done the year, and we don't get a lot of complaints on emails, WhatsApp, and calls. Say some of our viewers back on Ground Zero, they know if you watch this our very beloved SCBC, and for the past month we don't work tirelessly with the satellite company for make sure say the problem be solved, and throughout this month, we want to give support for those who don't come in contact with we, and we hope say by sharing this, many more of Nago take them to those where they don't get the connection yet, so that they will be able to connect and to watch the channel. And the worst part will even happen when they adopt our president. They hear the owner for different places. They start the call all over the place. They want to see of EasyBC because they watch them, and they show how much our people don't be engulfed in watching this channel, so much so that when they don't get and they like they sick. So if you understand how this channel don't change the face of Ambazonia altogether and make La Republic tremble. So yeah, we discover say. Well, we don't really know the source of this blackout for some of our viewers, but what we know and say, if you get a technician, the thing around the try for do and you work for some people and say, would either tell them to change the LNB. LNB now the receiver way they on the top of your dish. Some LNB then get stronger receiving power. Where they feel receive, they boost the reception of the images. So one day they're on weak, so the problem where it can cause these images to go away. The one day they get weak LNBs, it's just cut them out completely, so they don't get signal. For those who they get strong LNB, they still be able to get them. But again, for worst case scenario, even when you get strong LNB, it give you bad images. So what you will have seen, I say, if you shift your dish, change position, try find different position, somehow you will be able to get the signal. So if you know any person where you get signal for this channel, first tell him make it find a technician. When you find a technician would even tell you about the LNB, if the LNB be strong enough, or first of all, maybe change the side where the dish they move the dish, find signal. If he try to get small signal and not be good enough, make he put a better LNB. When you tell technician about LNB, you go understand them. So any person where you know get signal, try to get this message through to the person so that they will get their signals back and get their TV channels on track.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Ray, for that technical advice there for our viewers. Yes, you might have scrambles on your channel, but there's a few troubleshooting techniques that you can get back on live with your channel, or if somebody calls you or somebody contacts you that they are unable to receive SCBC, the very first troubleshooting is to call in an installer to come into your home and check your receiver. On top of your dish, there's a small thing on top of the dish. It's called the LNB. They need to check that if it's still working. If they can't repair that, they might need to change it. But before you go that route, you just consider moving your dish to a different location. So you just move your dish a few meters away. That is what most of the people that have done the troubleshooting have done, and it has worked for them. So consider shifting your dish from the current position. If that doesn't work, you will have to change your LNB for it to work. Hundreds of thousands of our viewers are still online, and we're excited to keep bringing SBC to your homes. But then we always feel very bad when one person or two people can't view SBC. So we must take that as a joint responsibility together. When somebody cannot view at their home, then you are viewing at your home, you should share the tips with that person.
Yeah.
Get the person to call in a technician. Get the technician to change the location of the dish. Get a technician to look at the LNB of the dish and maybe change it or fix it. We want all of our people to be able to view SBC TV in their homes.
Yeah, and we're not going to notice we're there for a brand new studio. I want to shout out to our designer. He's a very creative guy. He designed a brand new, nice looking studio. And I want just to inform our viewers, there's a lot of people behind the scenes for ACBC way. They do a lot of work. When I only see me and Derry, they catch it off the air, it'd be like, now we do the things. But I mean, there's a lot of unsung heroes behind the scenes. So I will not continue the show. I will not thank our brother for the great work we do and for designing us such a beautiful studio. So yes, we thank you very much. Probably to watch the show right now. We want to say we appreciate what you don't do and the great work we do. And I mean, I don't design all the studios here at ACBC. So he do a great job. Anytime we see a studio where he like say me get changed, I design a new one, suggest and say we like make the studio look like this. And we want to thank this brother very much, and we know that God will bless you more. And that's what we like Amazonians to do. This our revolution with the fight and with passion and love. So may we continue with the same passion for every aspect we get up with this revolution. That's what we win them. They need to pay no man any money. No man need to expect any pay. The only pay they expect are the position boya. So any person they just do your own work with it for make sure so we show one thank our brother who designed this very beautiful studio. I mean look at that the shine for the studio.
Yes, indeed. I don't think we thank our technicians behind the cameras enough. I don't think we thank our technical team enough. We have got a team of guys around the world who are doing amazing things to keep SCBC on air. And I think that at times we come here and we take all the credit and we don't say how grateful we are as Amazonians for the wonderful work that they're doing. Like you can see our new studio now, a lot of work has been put into the studio the last 2 months because our people were wanting better images, better quality images, and the guys, the designer, got into work and he has done an amazing job again as usual, and we just want to shout out to our studio designer. We also want to say thank you to our teams from around the world. We have teams in about 5 countries around the world making sure that we have SCBC live 24 hours a day. That is a lot if you ask me, and this is done because a few committed people in Germany, in America, in Australia, South Africa, and also in Belgium are ensuring that we have this channel on air. This is really the spirit. This is the Amazonian spirit. This is the spirit that we have built over a year. This is what we might never lose sight of. At times we are worried by the things that are happening, but these are the things that we should celebrate. We all coming together from different parts of the world and being able to fit in pieces of the puzzle to do amazing things together. We should always celebrate that. We should always have that in the top of our minds that we are doing amazing. It's just a year that we have been working together. I bet you before the end of this year, we will do magic together, but we need to keep going. We need to keep bringing more people on board to join the ship. So in a moment, we will bring in our special guest, and we are going to take this show right up to another level. So Ray has talked to the people who are struggling to receive their channel. Ray, I still want you to re-emphasize the importance to our brothers in the diaspora to support people at home to buy dishes for SCBC. Right now, our statistics is showing that in West Africa, about 1.2 million people are watching the channel, but that is not enough. That is not enough because that's the whole of West Africa. If you want to work out the numbers, we probably keep home at about 400 to 500 homes watching SCBC. That is not enough. We have about 3 million, 4 million to 4 million homes at home. And we have about 2 million Amazonians abroad. To install SCBC is just about 25,000 francs. If you already have a TV at home, you can buy a basic TV for like 45,000. So with 70,000, you can hook up a home with SCBC, and we will be bringing information right into that home for that household, for those people in that neighborhood. And I want Ray to really emphasize of the importance of us abroad, to be supporting homes that don't have TVs, to be supporting homes that don't have SCBC, to hook them up with SCBC. It's really a cheap initiative and some way that you could bring a lot of information into people's homes. Yeah.
I remember saying when we start Amber Perspective a long while ago, I will emphasize on the need for every household for Ambazonia for gate ACBC. And one thing we will be talking at the time, I say make those of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, make the try for support those back at home and buy them a satellite a package. I mean, with just 26,000 francs, you'll get a whole package and just get a technician to come and install it. So we see call on the people in the diaspora for make sure, say, every household for Amberland gets that the decoder and the dish for watch this channel. The reason, if you tell them now, say, time way they disrupt internet, the only way, the only source of information where our people get, where they rely on, now this TV channel. And if you tell you now, say, they even watch more for villages past as they watch inside cities for Amberland. For my village in particular, I know very well, say, they watch this channel they very much because my family back in the village, you tell me every now and then about the things the way they see them. So you will find, say, make we for the diaspora, we try. I don't give out a challenge. Say, make we at least put 10 dishes for 10 families back at home, you know, so that it will encourage our people to get first-hand information from here, because whenever you get information where come from here, now information where they don't research them and they don't get the truth, that way we tell our people so that they don't go dilute and with all the lies away they outside there. Like we know, say some newspaper like Republic don't just come out with their own lies, say our president and the cabinet members they are only just for make me that skin define. Imagine say we don't get SCBC for can't tell when I say a lie. Say our president and the rest of the cabinet, where they be arrested or they be abduct them, they still in Nigeria, and there's a legal process where they go on, and we know things say for any moment Nigeria don't even think to send them for Yaoundé.
Yes, we will have a short music interlude, and we'll bring on our guest, Mr. Atam Milan, to share some perspective with us, to talk about his experience the last week with the abduction of our leaders, the experience that he went through as a person, and a lot more. You know, Mr. Milan is somebody who's got a lot of perspective of his own, so we will try to question him and get into a lot of that with you together, the viewer. Just hang in there. We will have a short music break and we'll bring him on.
Sure.
come there, they wait. Set it on Mumu for junction. Then I wait till you do. Yeah, you don't touch the wrong point. If na love we go play, na feeling we go throw it, ping pong. And I bet to you, the else no be treat you right. You want to me Mumu, even April fool. Ha, this no be highlights. I'm here for your love, and I need your touch. Don't do me April fool. When I treat you right, when I hold you, I give you real love. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love. I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love. I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love. I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love. I will never let it go down.
My hopes and my dreams, everything is gone. I try to take it off to refresh the brain, but everything is still, so I take it to the brain like I fall for you, and I die for you. I'm a rise up from the dead, and I love you still, cause the love is real. But I thought about Kelly, Nash, Lina, Sina, they can fight it for my love, buddy. I'ma got you. Sina, wanna get you. I'ma got you. Wanna work some money, then I fall on you. Girl, I change your life. Look into my eyes, you can see it's true. You can see it's true.
Love sits in me, girl, like a gunshot. It dey make me dey feel like I did for Hong Kong. Then I wait till you do, with me I say make I come talk. It dey sweet me for body, I dey feel like a king kong. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Show love to this girl, wanna take her far away. Wanna take you somewhere, baby, so we could feel some free. Wanna keep you by my side, girl, and treat you really right. See, I be talking, my fucking, my making my money retreat. See, I be calling my baby, she had it, she picking my call. Anything you want me to do, I do. I go do many things for you. For your love, I go kick out. For your love, I go buy many goats. For your love, I go buy beans, so just to call people to celebrate. I will cook for your love, I will laundry for your love. But before that, I just wanna let you know. This sits in me, girl, like a gunshot. It dey make me dey feel like I did for Hong Kong. When I wait till you do, with me I say make I come talk. It dey sweet me for body, I dey feel like a king kong. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down. Yeah, yeah. Come show me your love, I will never let it go down.
It's the piano student.
Original time, Idris J, Zazie.
Yeah.
Welcome back to studio. We want to welcome our guest. We want to welcome our guest, Mr. Atam Milan, to our new studios. Welcome to our perspective again, Mr. Milan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's too sad that we never get to see you. We've only had you for 8 months. We've only had you on our perspective one time. We're really excited to have you today. Despite the happenings of the last week that are very charged, are very emotional.
Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure to be here once again. And it's a privilege to be on this platform, knowing that I don't get to have this opportunity very often. I hope that it's going to change, and I'm going to make an effort to ensure that I appear a lot more often. Yes, the events of the past week have been rather traumatizing for all of us, and having been in communication and in contact with a whole lot of our compatriots across the world, there is no doubt in my mind that our people are really going through a very difficult time. But the resilience that we have manifested over the past year or so continues to manifest itself, and there is no doubt in my mind that we are going to overcome. We are a strong people. We've survived for the past 56, 57 years. There is no doubt that we're going to overcome this one.
That is a good outlook, and indeed, but there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot that has been said about the abduction, and what we know is you were supposed to attend that meeting, and we want you to just relive that experience with our viewers. Just tell our viewers what happened that day leading up to when you realized that our leaders were arrested.
Well, I think this is a story that I've told already. It is, again, it's a very humbling experience. And the only thing I can say is, like I've said before, God works in mysterious ways. And the only thing I can say is that God manifested himself in that trip. Because when I left from Johannesburg, and having used Rwanda Air flights so many times, I think way back as 2008, I've been using their flights very frequently. I cannot remember a single time when the flight has been so late. We were late for 2 hours by the time we took off. Got to Addis, or rather to Kigali, and by the time we took off from Kigali, we were late by 3 hours. By the time we got to Lagos, we had already lost over 4 or 5 hours. And as a result, I had asked for my flight to be moved, and the flight was moved from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. But interestingly, from 6 p.m. when we were supposed to take off, the flight only took off at 8:34 p.m. So once again, my flight from Lagos to Abuja was late by 2.5 hours. And to crown it all, after having been traveling for over 24 hours for a flight that normally, if it were a direct flight, would take 6 hours. After having been picked up from the airport and on our way to the hotel, the car of my friends got pulled over by the police, and we were delayed by the police for over an hour, probably an hour and a half. So by the time we got to the hotel, it was 11 p.m. But the SSS agents who had left instructions at the hotel to say as soon as I arrived, the ladies at the reception needed to inform them, had left also. But the 2 receptionists had just changed shifts at 10 o'clock, and I arrived just after 10, and I arrived at 11. So when I arrived, the receptionists who received me were different from those who were there when this event had taken place. And from then on, it just became a string of drama.
Okay, and you want to relive that drama with us? A lot of our viewers haven't heard first what happened exactly when you got to the hotel until you realized that an arrest had been made and they were looking for you.
Well, I have to say, like I mentioned, by the time I got to the hotel, it was already 11 p.m., probably just after 11. I was tired. I'd been traveling for over 24 hours, 25, I think. And on that, I hadn't even brushed my teeth. So when I got there, for me, the only thing that I had in mind was I needed to rest. I'm also aware that the meeting was supposed to have started at about 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And up until about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I was still chatting with Barrister Nalova, getting updates, trying to find out what was going on, how late was I, how far was the meeting going. And by then she told me that people had already assembled, but there were a number of 1 or 2 individuals who were still on their way. Again, it was a social gathering, so I didn't anticipate that people would come in too early. So when I got to the hotel, the gentleman who picked me up from the airport took me to the back of the hotel by the lake where they were supposed to be sitting. And we did a quick scan and walked around all the way to the different angles of the restaurant, the bar, and realized that nobody was there. So he said it's possible that they might have finished the meeting and gone to another venue to have drinks. So he would call them so that we can join them. And I told him there is no way I can join them. I've been traveling already for over 24 hours. I'm tired. All I need right now is some food and some sleep. So he accompanied me to the reception. We had our check-in, and I went to bed. I only realized later on, I think days later on, that while I was sleeping, the agents of SSS came back to the hotel to go to the rooms of those who had been abducted to get their belongings. And they went into 4 rooms and took their belongings next door to me. But they did not know that I was there, because by then the ladies at the reception had not told them. And the ladies did not tell them because they didn't know what had happened a few hours before they came, they took over. In the morning, I woke up at about 8. And of course, the key reason for me going on this trip was because I needed to go have an assessment of the humanitarian situation and to advise the president on what best to do. You may be aware that we have lots of children, some who are being born, but many of them who have crossed the borders with their mothers. And what we do not have up until now is a plan for children. And it was important that we put in place what we call child-friendly spaces, where children can play even if their mothers have gone to the market or they've gone to the farm. Then we are sure that the children are well taken care of. So I needed to do an assessment and be able to advise in terms of what needed to be done with especially the children, but also the women, pregnant and lactating mothers, as well as young women who were in need of hygiene kits and so on. So when I woke up that morning, I had expected a call. I woke up late due to the tiredness. I woke up at about 7:30, 7:45, and I expected to have received a call. So when I checked, my phone had received no call, which for me was strange. So I started making calls at about 8 o'clock, between 8 and 9, and both Sisiku and Nalova did not answer their phone. And I felt that was strange. But what crossed my mind then was that if they had gone out the last night, it's very possible that they had drinks and they stayed up late last night, and as a result, they are still sleeping. So I opened my laptop and I sat and worked for about an hour or 2. And at about 10 or 11, I called the restaurant to find out if I could have breakfast, and they said no, it was too late. So I had to wait for lunch, which was afternoon. But at the same time, I had already received some calls to find out if I was okay, because it seems as if a couple of people were calling Sisiku and his phone was not going through. So these two, the fact that I was calling myself and they were not picking up, but their phones were ringing, and I was calling through WhatsApp, still using my foreign phone number, and the fact that somebody is now telling me that they are trying to get hold of them and they are not able to get hold of them. For me, that was a bit of a concern. But then I thought, okay, let's give it another hour. So I took a quick shower. Just afternoon, I went down back to the back of the restaurant and ordered some food. And just as I was about to start, I was drinking. Then the gentleman who had picked me up from the airport came. And that's when as he sat down, he said, I got a call last night. I got a call this morning from somebody who told me that last night he got a call from Dr. Fidelis Ndeche saying that he's in Abuja and he's been arrested by the SSS. But he wasn't sure if he was arrested in his house or somewhere else. But already for me, my brain was beginning to tick. Now, here are the phones that are not going through. Here is this story of Fidelis having been arrested. And so I started to try and put 2 and 2 together. And just then, a young man who was working a waiter at the restaurant was narrating the ordeal of the last night to his friend. And that's when we called him over and said, what happened? And he told us that men armed to the teeth just walked through the restaurant terrace all the way down to where they were sitting by the lake. And it seems as if they knew exactly where they were going, because they didn't hesitate. They didn't look left or right. They just went straight to them and got them. At the time, he still thought there were about 6 or 7 people. We did our count and drew our own conclusions. Of course, later on, we realized that the number was bigger than that. And as soon as we got that, the first thing was, okay, these people have been arrested, and we were told by the SSS, so we need to start making some phone calls. So immediately, I got the young man, the other young man who accompanied him, myself, and we started making calls to some high quarters within Nigeria. Some people we know whom we know can open some doors. And we called them straight away and said, listen, here is the situation, you need to intervene. Please make some phone calls. Tell us where our compatriots are. Tell us also what we need to do to get them out. At the time in my mind, I was thinking, we need to keep this hush-hush. Our leadership has been arrested. We need to find a way to get them, even if it means we go there, pay for the bail, so that somehow we try and contain this. But when I made a call, I realized that the information was already circulating within the Singa network. So for me, that was already one problem that we needed to contain. So we made the few calls, and once the calls were made, I then turned and I think I made a call to one of the members of cabinet and said, this is the situation we are faced with. Please inform the cabinet and see if they can convene an emergency meeting and start taking emergency measures. Once we had done all the calls and were satisfied that we had spoken to all the key people, the gentleman who was accompanying me needed to rush to town, but also, we also realized that Barrister Nalova had not spent the night at home, which meant she had little children, and so he had to drive to her house to ensure that the children had food and everything was taken care of, while I continued to make calls. But this is the interesting thing, and this is where you see how God manifests himself. While, as we walked from the restaurant back to the reception, there was a shift change once again. This was probably after 2. And there was a gentleman who was very, very livid with anger, and he was shouting at the women, telling them that he can't understand how simple instructions cannot be followed. They have left simple instructions and they cannot follow them. So without knowing, and very innocent, I walked up to the counter by the reception and I leaned and I was listening to the man shouting at the young ladies, and the ladies were just sitting and listening. And after shouting at them, he walked away together with his friend. And I got my key and got everything I needed and walked up to my room. Only later did we learn that the gentleman who was shouting was actually a gentleman from the SSS, angry that they had failed to inform him that I had checked into the hotel. And I was standing in front of him and he was looking at me, I was looking at him. I had no clue what he was shouting about. So went back to my room, made some calls, and until the evening when it just dawned on me that and I started to try and analyze the situation. What am I still doing here? I think there is every reason for me to leave this hotel. This is at about 6 or 7. And I made a call to somebody who said, Milan, you need to leave that hotel with immediate effect. And a couple of friends shared the same point of view, and that's when I called my friends and said, guys, you need to take me out of here. And they said, well, we've already paid for the night. And I said, it doesn't matter, take me out of here. And as we were now walking to the car after they had come to get me, a gentleman ran out of the hotel and said, sir, you can't leave the hotel. We've been given instructions to tell you that you cannot leave the hotel. My manager says, if you were to leave, we must inform you so that you can talk to the manager. So I said, okay, go back, tell the manager that I'm here, I'm about to check out. The manager should come so we talk before I leave. But already for me, it was very clear. So as soon as he went back into the hotel, I got into the car and left. And that's when it became clear to me that this thing was bigger than just a simple raid at night while people were drinking. And that's when we started making calls and expanding the net. Of course, over the next few nights, it became a game of cat and mouse. But it was also important for me then that no matter what happened, I needed to stay on, try and ensure that the groundwork was laid, for instance, to ensure that we got the proper legal coverage for our compatriots, for our leader who was in jail. We needed to get a network of high-profile individuals who could make calls to high quarters and start to knock on doors. We needed to ensure at the time when it was very clear that Yaoundé was manipulating and doing everything to get them across, we needed to ensure that we continue to lobby and to do a lot of lobbying and campaigning to ensure that they were not taken over. So the next few days, about 3 or 4 days of me being there while keeping a low profile, included meeting with lawyers, liaising and updating the cabinet members on a daily basis, trying to also put in place a small team of individuals who could be monitoring the situation. And that is how we were able to puncture the move that Yaoundé was making at the time to try and get them across.
Wow, Milan, that's a great analysis of what happened on that day. And to me, like you just said, it's actually God that staged the events of that day. Now, everything else right now has been speculations, and I would like you to give me your opinion on why you think our leaders were arrested, because from what we know, they didn't commit any crime, and they were just looking out for our citizens.
Yeah.
So analytical, I know you have an analytical mind. What have you, over the time that you've since this event unfolded, why do you think they were arrested? And we really need to try to figure this out because everybody's confused.
Well, the first thing I need to say, even before I get into that, is that there are too many heroes out there, too many individuals who want to do the breaking news, and so we are getting 1,000 versions to one story. It is important that I state very clearly that the only channel from which our people can receive information on the whereabouts and the well-being of our leadership in Nigeria is through the spokespersons for the government and from the members of cabinet. Any other person telling whatever stories they are telling is, and sometimes they could be telling the truth, but very often and most of the time, what they are saying is wrong. We've heard all kinds of narratives, and many of them I'm baffled because I'm on the ground. I can see for myself. I know who I'm talking to. I know the phone calls I'm making. And when I hear the stories that people are spewing, you ask yourself, where do they get these stories from? So it is important that I clarify that. Now, in terms of what exactly constituted what we have termed an abduction, is because a group of individuals meet on a Friday evening, a social evening, to gather around a table and share some drinks, while also analyzing and thinking about what to do with their compatriots who have fled their own country into a neighboring country seeking refuge. We do know, and everybody knows it's out there, there are campaigns for people to contribute to our compatriots who are displaced, from clothing to food, to shelter, everything.
Education.
Everybody knows that. And the president, having made a trip to the US, comes back and wants to be briefed on the situation of the refugees. And in fact, the plan had been on the Saturday morning, him and myself, we were going to travel to the field to see the refugees. That's why when I woke up at 8 o'clock, I had expected a call. I thought I was late. Perhaps they had been calling me while I was sleeping. It's because I had expected a call to say, where are you? We need to go. When I didn't see the call, then I started to wonder, why is it that up until now, I haven't been called, and yet we're supposed to catch a flight. So it's very clear that this had got nothing to do with all the stories we are hearing. They were committing no crime. They were having an evening, just like every other group of people who have got the right, even if they are refugees and asylum seekers, to meet from time to time in a social gathering. But beyond that, we do know that we were set up. There was a clear campaign to pick up the heart of the struggle. When you pick up the president of the interim government, you pick up the chairman of the SCNC, you pick up Jikon Tassan, you pick up Barrister Eyambe, Dr. Fidelis Ndeche, and somebody like Mangang, who was also targeted. Then it wasn't an innocent rape. Barrister Nalova, who has been at the very center of this struggle from the beginning, all of them. If you think about all the individuals who were picked up, Barrister Shufai and the legal work that he has been doing for our struggle for the past 15 years or so, then it wasn't an accident. There was a deliberate effort to basically tear out the heart of the struggle. We do know from the intelligence we're getting that Yaoundé was involved, that already for the past month or so, there were already whispers saying that they were going to pick up the leadership of the movement for the end of January. We had that intelligence. We just didn't know exactly where or when. We do know, for instance, that they had connived with certain elements in Nigeria, and that is why I continue to plead to our people and to say, whatever you do, whatever you say, please let's continue to be courteous to the Nigerian government. Let's continue to be thankful to the Nigerian government for having accommodated our people, for having shown a lot of kindness, for its hospitality. We've seen other videos and other instances where members of the government of Nigeria have expressed the will to accommodate our people, give them blankets, give them shelter when in their moment of crisis. So it is important to highlight that the individuals who were involved in this raid of our leadership were not necessarily representative of the Nigerian hierarchy. and that we continue to interact with the Nigerian government on the basis of the understanding that the Nigerian government has been extremely hospitable and kind to our people, and that we continue to appeal to the good sense, the human rights record, and the rule of law record that the Buhari government is known for in Nigeria. So, yes, there was a clear case of attempted kidnap by the regime in Yaoundé with the help of a few elements within the Nigerian security services.
Mr. Milan, over the last few days, we have had experts to analyze the situation, the abduction, and clearly, if you all were abducted and the alarm didn't go out, before we knew it, you guys would have been en route to Yaoundé. I think that was clearly the plan. And some experts have said we probably don't see what we are playing into, that there's a whole geopolitics that is at play here, and that is what would get Yaoundé in bed with Abuja, and the fear of the unknown, which is an independent Ambazonia. You want to talk a little bit to that?
Well, we have always known. I think the first thing is that our leaders, and I could have been one of them at the moment, are paying a price that we've always anticipated that we would possibly pay at some point or another. We are very conscious of the dangers of the route that we have undertaken, which is the route of trying to get, and with the determination to get our freedom and our independence regardless. We have always been aware of the geopolitics that is involved in this. Yes, there has been some analysis that has been done, and our analysis, and I'm very sure that we are right and we know this, we understand the bigger picture, that the potential, the imminent independence, self-determination and declaration of the statehood of Southern Cameroons will have a big ripple effect across the region. We are more than aware of that. We know, for instance, that it will not only affect Cameroon as it is known to the world today, it is potentially going to have a big effect on the Central African region. We are talking about the Gulf of Guinea here. There are many players out there who have got multiple interests in this Gulf, and we are at the very heart of that Gulf. When you start looking at the oil, the touristic potential, the economy, the cocoa, banana, everything. But you're also talking about the manpower. Next door to us is a country with almost 200 million inhabitants. That's a big market. So there is, the geopolitics around this is massive. But if one also considers the fact that Cameroon, as we know it, is not an independent nation, but happens to be just the vassal of a European country whose very well-being and existence depends on the Francophonie, then we should also understand that the potential of an independent Southern Cameroons is not only going to affect Cameroon or the Central African region, it is going to affect the whole Francophonie as we know it, but also have a serious ripple effect on the French economy and French politics. I continue to say this will go beyond the Francophonie. When you look at Nigeria and the potential it has, but the fact that Nigeria is never really able to achieve its potential because it's surrounded by, completely surrounded almost, except for the ocean, by French-speaking countries which are not independent. So when you look at the corruption, the bad governance, everything, there is no way Nigeria can really ever reach its full potential. The same holds for Ghana, which happens to be one of the beacons on the African continent, but just cannot make it. It cannot break away from this cycle of poverty, unemployment, because it is surrounded by French-speaking countries. So we know that the independence of Southern Cameroon has got a major, major potential for destabilizing, but for the better, the African continent as we know it. So it comes as no surprise. We know it, but we continue to appeal to our friends, to our neighbors to say, whatever changes our independence bring, it is going to be a change for the better. And so we are asking them to be open-minded and to embrace it.
Yeah, you know, I think we need to talk more about this subsequently so our people get to understand why we're having so much trouble getting our independence, because our independence comes with a lot of strings attached to it. Yes. I mean, as we've just explained. Well, however, let's try to look at our people. It's been a week and more since our leaders were adopted, and we don't know anything about their whereabouts, whether they've been charged or what's going to happen to them, and our people are confused. What advice do you have to our people and the way forward looking at this, and how do we move, transcend this and move forward and push this struggle? Because apparently La Republic thinks that by doing this, they'll kill the struggle. But then what do we do to show them that they just can't do this?
Okay. The first thing we need to acknowledge is that we are all going through a very painful period. A painful period where our compatriots are going through this period of darkness that we are going through with them. Because while they are in this state of darkness, we are all in a state of darkness. We also know that the present situation just doesn't make sense to a whole lot of people. But when one does proper analysis of the situation, it makes a lot of sense. What Cameroon has done is plunged Nigeria into a diplomatic embarrassment. Nigeria finds itself diplomatically embarrassed because Cameroon has tried to infiltrate the very heart of the Nigerian security by attempting to kidnap leaders of a freedom-fighting movement, individuals who were under the protection of the Nigerian government. Many of the people who were kidnapped, or at least abducted, as we call it now, are either refugees or asylum seekers. So under the Geneva Convention, they are under the protection of the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government has got the responsibility for their well-being. The fact that somebody is able to infiltrate Nigerian security and attempt to kidnap them puts Nigeria in a very, very difficult position. Many of the individuals who were kidnapped happen to be top-level professionals in Nigeria, businessmen, professionals who are running their own business, but also some of the best academics that Nigeria has at the moment. So it's an embarrassment on all the fronts when you look at it. Now, Nigeria, having stepped in there and prevented Cameroon from kidnapping our leaders and going with them to Cameroon, of which, of course, we all know what could have happened. The worst case, the best case scenario would have been to be dumped in a jail in some Condé dungeon that we don't know about, with scabies coming all over the body. And the worst, and we should also imagine the worst, because a lot of the intelligence we are getting was that the plan was not to go and dump us in jail, but to get rid of us once and for all. That's a very diabolic plan if you think about it. Now, the fact that Yaoundé has attempted once again and failed to silence our movement, to silence our quest for self-determination, tells you that ours is a God-ordained struggle. For somebody like me, who was a bit skeptical about, and every time they talk about the hand of God in our struggle, I was like, no, let's just focus on doing it ourselves. The things that have happened over the past week, painful as it is, tells you that somehow there is divine providence, there's divine intervention in the things that are happening to us. So the message that goes out to our people is a very simple message. We haven't come this far to fail. We've come this far because we are bound to succeed. We do not have a choice. This is our destiny. We must fulfill it. When you think about the fact that there's been a failure to abduct our leaders, that it has now become a matter for the courts, because the lawyers that our movement has hired to defend our leaders, they have made it very clear that, yes, we may have to wait another couple of weeks, maybe a bit more, but the bottom line is that they will have their day in court. Once they go to court, somebody's got to prove that these people were busy having drinks and doing anything else but having drinks. The fact that they cannot prove it leaves me very confident that our leaders are going to be discharged honorably, and they're going to come home to us. And like I've been saying, they may have caged the bird, but the bird must continue to sing, and we must continue to keep the song of the bird alive. You may know, this time last year, I think today is the 17th.
17th.
Exactly the 17th. This time last year, our leaders were abducted by the Yaoundé regime, dumped in jail, and they thought that was the end of the struggle. It did not end the struggle. They continue to be our leaders. We continue to respect them for the role they've played, and we do know. Clear message to Yaoundé: we have adopted a Hydra approach to this struggle. Every time you sever one head off, many other heads spring up. So there is no doubt in my mind that this particular crisis is actually an opportunity for us to take the struggle forward.
Clearly, like a year ago, our leaders expected us to take the struggle further with more steam. It's the same expectations that our leaders do have now. And what I would want in retrospect is that you should give us, a brief analysis of what has happened over the year, what the struggle has become over the year, some of the mistakes we have made, and some of the gains we have picked up, so that we start looking at a way forward, but mindful of the mistakes that we have made as a people over the year.
Well, I have always said this. Very often we tend to be a bit too hard on ourselves. We tend to be too critical, but when you break it down, after 12 months or 13 months of the struggle, what we have achieved is something that very, very few struggle movements in history have achieved. If one looks back at the history of the ANC and where it was, where we are today and where the ANC was at this time, the ANC had already been in the struggle for over 80 years. We've been able to achieve it in 13 months. This time last year when our leaders were arrested, Barrister Abonkongo, Dr. Fontem, and the others, Mancho BBC, when they were arrested, it was a moment of despondency for us. But just like that, leaders sprang up and took the revolution forward. And it has been the case moving to this point. There is no doubt in my mind that some of us who are here today, we may not be here this time next year, but that does not mean that it's going to lessen the steam. But in the process of this all, we've made mistakes. But remember once again, and I've said this a number of times, we were not trained for this. We were not brought up with the mentality and the thinking that one day we will have to spring up as one person and fight for something that we had been unable to do successfully over a period of 55, 56 years. The fact that we are here today tells you that there is a determination in our people, but also the faith, the providence and the divine intervention that at this point in time, this is what we will be doing. Yes, over this period, what have we achieved? We've achieved a lot. What happened on the 22nd of September and the 1st of October, for me, is testament to the fact that we may be physically still enchained to Yaoundé, but mentally, psychologically, we are a free people. We've already liberated ourselves. And very, very few instances you have a case like this where people have gone through this and within a short space of time, they are able to transform like we have. As it stands, Yaoundé is helpless. The regime in Yaoundé does not know what to do because they may arrest our people, abduct them, kidnap them, jail them, put them in their dungeons. But even deep in those dungeons, those people continue to be defiant and they continue to be resilient. That is an achievement. That is a major achievement. When one considers the fact that we have had to bring the kind of unity that we haven't known in a long time, we were engineered to be divided, to hate and despise each other. The kind of unity that we have built over the past 13 months is miraculous. When you think about the fact that for 55 years, our brains and our minds were made to be divided, but we've been able to bridge that gap within a short space of time. That's a major victory that we've scored. When one thinks also about the fact that over the past 13 months or so, our diaspora, the communication, the relationship that exists between our people, just the fact that you have never met an individual, but you are able to interact with that individual as if you're brothers and sisters, as if you've known each other the rest of your life, the whole of your life, tells you that we've achieved a lot. But there are other things. In this case, I was just talking about the victory that we've achieved mentally, psychologically, morally. But when you think about it beyond that, look at the SCBC that we have. Every crisis comes with an opportunity, and we've been able to dig deep into this crisis and find the opportunity. And that's how today we've got the SCBC. We've got a government, an interim government in exile. We had SCACUV. We were able to bring our frontline leaders to be able to form SCACUV. From there, we were able now to build the different country teams. And today, in almost every country where you find Southern Cameroonians, our people are proud. But think about even the pride that comes with it. Not too long ago, this time last year, brandishing that flag was not such a was not such a
thing, yeah.
a thing that anybody would proudly do.
Yeah.
Calling yourself Ambazonia was not the pride that everybody had. Today, every single child, including my 9-year-old daughter, is a proud Ambazonian. And I think we've achieved a lot. So these are the things we've achieved. But also think about the other side. Our brothers on the east of the Mungo, the Francophones, many of them at this point were laughing. They were deriding us. They looked at us with contempt and they said, oh, you're going to go nowhere with this. The respect that they are beginning to show us tells you, everybody, that we have achieved a lot. If for some reason today we were going to sit back around the table and talk to each other, the contempt that the average Francophone would talk with to our people would not be the same. There is a clear case of mutual, at least mutual respect at this stage. We continue to build our confidence and we continue to build our self-worth to the point where we do not want to limit ourselves to the relationship with the Francophone. We want to build our self-worth to the point where we are interacting with the people of the world with pride and with confidence. Through this, like I said, we've made mistakes, and some of the mistakes sometimes has been the out of sheer ignorance, out of sheer excitement. Simple case in point, you have people who go onto the social media and put out information that's not correct, and they'll come back and apologize and say it was out of excitement. There are simple mistakes like this. But also sometimes they believe that unity is possible where it's not, and other cases where we think unity is impossible, where in fact it is possible. And so through all of this, there are some mistakes that we've made. We continue to make mistakes. We will continue to make mistakes. But as long as we do, we make these mistakes in good faith. We are on the right path. At the end of the day, we're going to look back some years back to all what we've done, and out of this experience, we're going to pull lessons which will help us to move towards the future.
Yeah. You know, you just, before you mentioned about our achievements and you mentioned about SVC. And the last few months I've been looking at revolutions. We are the first to come with a TV station. No revolution has succeeded to have its own 24 hours TV station. And we should be proud of that, and this is sheer willpower of all Ambazonians. It takes about 5 people from 5 different locations to keep this TV on. That is something huge that we have pulled off. No movement has ever done it before in the history of revolutions. So we really need to be proud of some of the things that we have accomplished so far. You've talked about us having an interim government in place right now that we really need to support. And we are mindful of the fact that many of our leaders of that government, many of our cabinet members are in jail. So what is the way forward for us, the people of Ambazonia? How do we support the interim government going forward? How do you see it?
Well, again, I go back to 17th of January 2017, when Barrister Agbo Kongo, Dr. Fontaine, Mancho BBC, and the others were arrested. For many, especially for those in Yaoundé, they thought this is it. But as they say, les sécessionnistes décapités. But we were not. They hadn't cut our head because we are 8 million strong. And that's why when we talk about the successes that we've achieved over the past year, we are thanking everybody, thanking our compatriots in the diaspora, and the sacrifices and the contributions that they've made. We must not forget our old mothers and fathers back at home, our brothers and sisters, the people who are selling the Bensikin drivers, everybody. I mean, the old grandma who passed away a few days ago, may her soul rest in peace, and the day she picked up her peace plant on the 22nd of September and went out in defiance of the bill and the police and the gendarmes and everybody that had been sent by Yaoundé. It tells you that everybody is playing their little part. Some may be playing a bigger role, others may be playing a small role, but every role counts. And it is for that reason that when we talk about the fact that we are where we are today, I've got nothing but confidence in my heart. Firstly, because our people are a resilient people, but also because we have seen time and time again how God has manifested himself by coming somehow and just doing things on our behalf when we are sitting there in pure innocence and ignorance, and he makes it happen for us. So there is no doubt. So it is important, therefore, that as devout and devoted compatriots and freedom fighters, revolutionaries, we continue to support the interim government. We now have a team of 3 who have been put in place to act in place of our president and continue to show the way. We must continue to give them our support, continue to encourage them to show leadership. This time last year, Barrister Bobga Harmony was a fugitive running away for his dear life, and today he's part of the leadership that is taking our movement forward. And that tells you that this thing is a moving wheel. And at one point or another, this being a spoke in the wheel, it becomes a turn of one spoke to take it forward, and then another spoke and another spoke. It becomes important also that everyone plays their part. This time last year, nobody knew Sisiku AyukTabe. Today, he is the leader of this revolution. This time next year, it could be somebody else playing another key role in support of him, pushing it forward. And like I keep saying, they may put the bird in the cage, but it doesn't stop the song to be sung. We must continue to sing the song regardless. When the bird comes out of the cage, he must know that in his absence, the song continued to sing.
Wow, Milan, I just like everyone else watching, they're quite impressed with the information that you give out there. But then I want to take us to this our revolution. Most often than not, people compare us to South Africa, to South Sudan, to other revolutions that have happened around the world. Yeah. And well, they will advance the point to suit their argument. Now, some people will tell you we can become like South Sudan, and some will tell you we can become like South Africa. And many people do not know that you have in your field of work, you've worked in South Sudan and in countries where separation has been a bone of contention. Now, can you probably tell us what you've done in such countries, and if you look at Ambazonia becoming a South Sudan tomorrow, or probably a South Africa, as people advance their arguments based on which side of the coin they're looking?
Yeah. Well, I think it is important that we continue to listen to everybody. We listen to the pessimists, just like the optimists, but we stick to reality and be as realistic as possible. Yes, I spent a year, in fact, exactly 13 months in South Sudan with the United Nations, where I did monitoring and evaluation. So I was privileged to spend 1 year in the country where I literally traveled every single state, what they call states, so you call provinces, regions, every single state on a weekly basis to understand the dynamics within South Sudan, be it from a tribal, clan, or just general South Sudanese politic, but also the relationship between South Sudan and Khartoum at the time. It is true also that South Sudan came with its weaknesses and its challenges, but it is important also that even as we strive to prevent the South Sudan scenario, we also acknowledge that we are not entirely in that kind of situation. And I'm going to try and put the two together in a different sense. Some 10, 11, 12 years ago when I was in South Sudan, you had 1 out of every 3 male was a soldier, or at least had some kind of military background or experience, which was natural because there was for decades, centuries, South Sudan was the backyard of Sudan and especially of Egypt and a whole lot of different parts of the world. This is when you talk about the trans-Sahara slavery, a lot of the slaves who were caught and taken across the Sahara came from South Sudan. So there had been always this, South Sudan had been seen as a place where everything was taken, from slaves through to the wealth, to everything. And especially the waters of the Nile, which as we know through the books of history feeds the Egyptian civilization up until today. But as a result of that, South Sudan was deprived of everything, and it was systematic. And it is very, very important to note that what is happening to us today is not accidental. Deprivation. We are not getting, we're producing most of the wealth, but we're getting nothing in return. It's all well laid down, calculated. And anybody who has taken the time to understand and study South Sudan and its history over time would understand that the South Sudanese went through the exact same experience. But we need to also draw the distinction and say, and I emphasize on this distinction because about a few months ago, about 6 months ago, when we had gone out on a diplomatic mission, and we're talking to this gentleman who was widely expected to be the next president of his country. He had made the comparison between us and South Sudan. And the answer I gave him was very simple. In South Sudan, the literacy rate then, as it is now, is extremely low. It's so low. And like I said, 1 out of every 3 male had at least some kind of military experience. 2 out of every 3 male had never been to school. And so for young men and women who were born in conflict, many of them understood that you can only resolve a conflictual situation through violent means. We are not that way. When you look at the literacy rate across Africa, Southern Cameroonians are amongst the highest. I can think of very few countries, Zimbabwe and a couple of others, who may have a higher literacy rate than us. That tells you that the dangers of us falling into a South Sudan scenario as it is today are very slim. We are educated, we are exposed, we've had our people across the diaspora. We have, it's also cultural. We come from a culture where violence is not necessarily where we are coming from. And that is perhaps the reason why for 56 years we have continued to engage a rogue regime that does not understand any other language but violence. That is on the cultural, governance, demographic side of it, and of course education. But when you look at what we are having today as self-defense groups, I think every single Southern Cameroonian acknowledges the importance of self-defense and that we are entitled with. We have the right through international statutes just like any other. We have got the right to self-defense. And we should be able to defend ourselves, defend our women, defend our children. That is something you cannot take away from us. It's enshrined in the constitutions of the world. What, however, we need to be careful about is encouraging splinter groups going out there in the name of self-defense. The danger with that is that while there might be usefulness in diversity, and diversity being that we may have different approaches to different things, the danger with letting groups of young boys and girls, largely boys, but sometimes girls, go out there with weapons, who have not been trained, who have not been schooled in the art of, it's not enough to be able to operate a weapon. There is a whole science behind the operationalization of a weapon, which includes discipline, which includes political education. As it stands, one of the weaknesses, and you had asked the question, what one of the weaknesses, the mistakes we've made, I think one area where we have failed dismally has been the lack of political education for our people. And here I'm not just talking about the young boys and in some cases girls who may have access to 1 or 2 weapons here and there, but I'm talking about our people generally. That is one area where I think there needs to be, not even strengthening, we need to start from scratch. We've been brought up in a system where the education made sure that we were not educated politically. As a result, there is such indiscipline in everything we do. You have a lot of people, and that's why somebody can go to bed at night and wake up in the morning and decide to fabricate a story and put it on the social media and expect people to believe it. It's simply because they do not understand the fundamentals of a revolution. The danger of having this happen to us and to our people without being able to contain it is that even if we, and as when we become successful eventually, you will have lots of young men and women who have been able to build their own power bases, are able to operate arms of whom you cannot control. The situation in South Sudan was very, very much the same, and that's why I'm trying to draw the distinction where the distinction as well as the convergence, points of convergence between the two, where you had generals in South Sudan. You had certain generals who kept their own military, either because the military, the group of young men and women who followed him happened to be from his tribe or happened to be from his region, then they kept them. And they decided that no, like you hear some of our compatriots begin to say, no, let us do our thing, we'll just collaborate. Now, collaboration means at some point we will disagree, but when you disagree with weapons in your hands, you get to a point where you start to use the weapons against each other. We're already seeing it on social media, how our people are beginning to use very harsh words, very bad words, a whole lot of negativity against each other. When you get to that point when you're carrying a weapon, the tendency is for you to use the weapon. And that is why it is important that at this very early stage, we do not favor any kind of fragmentation of our boys on the field.
Okay, thanks. I think it goes back to that political education because it keeps people grounded. It gives people the mental process of thinking through things and analyzing things in a political way, which is something we are not privileged to. We were groomed this way, not to be involved in politics, to just, whenever it becomes politics, it's a thing of the other side. So it's important that you talk about the importance of this political education. But on the when we gave a mandate to His Excellency Sisiku Ayuktabe to put together the interim government, we gave him a clear mandate: take us to Boya as fast as possible. And I'm a bit privy to the work of some of the secretaries, and everybody, they are sharp, focused on let us get to Boya as fast as possible. And clearly we are missing something. We are missing that political education, which is very important for grooming us to where we are going, for grooming us to Boya. This is going to take us another 6, 7, 9 months, a year. It's going to take us time. And it's very important that we also have that political education. And we didn't give that mandate to our government. Our government needs to stay focused on that. So how do we, as Southern Cameroonians, how do we now come together and push this political education agenda, use the SCBC platform to educate our people so that we are strong mentally for the place that we are going? Because I think it will take away some of the useless arguments that we have on social media if we were engaged in this political debate, political education, educating ourselves about other struggles, about other movements around the world, and looking at our context in all that. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Because the last conclave, we disbanded SCACUF, and SCACUF was really playing that role. So now, how do we as a people, how do we do that?
Well, you've just mentioned SCACUF being disbanded, and I know that there is a groundswell of concerns that is beginning to be raised by our people as to why this decision was taken to disband SCACUF. I think at that particular point in time, it seemed to make sense. But more and more, as people ask questions, it becomes relevant that we revisit the question and see if there is the need to have a political platform that will act as a buffer to the interim government, but at the same time, whose main mandate is to ensure that it strengthens the interim government, but plays a political role. Political role, like you were saying, which includes, for instance, political education, ensuring that our masses, be they at home or in the diaspora, get educated. In fact, when you talk about political education, I remember the story of an old man that I met on Robben Island, and how the ANC was able to educate its people, even those who were in prison. At every single point in time, they were educating each other. They were always making sure, and that's why many of them went to jail as illiterates, and when they came out, they had degrees, because you never spend any bit of your time doing nothing. It is important, therefore, that we maximize our time, ensuring that whatever little time, opportunity we have, we educate our people. That is very important. You talked about the importance of having a political platform and education that we need to give our people. That is something that we have been talking about. And when you talked about the mandate, I think this mandate should come naturally. But given the role that the interim government has got to play, it has to go out there and engage stakeholders from international stakeholders. It needs to be in the business of governing our people, coming up with policy issues. It becomes important that somebody else plays that role, ensures that it builds the confidence of our people and prepares them for the future. This is important also because it helps to start thinking about the kind of Southern Cameroons that we want to run. One of the difficulties we face generally as we go out there and try to pitch our country and this country that we envisage is the fact that, in as much as we have a blueprint, which we do know about, is the fact that not everybody can market that, and it becomes important that at every level, every single person knows the kind of country we want we envisage, and they are able to sell it and market it.
Yeah. So, well, when you're talking about this political education, I also see, like when we started, when SCACUF came into play around April,
yeah.
It was also a tool for mobilization. It brought people over, people who were not into the struggle. They brought into an institutionalized way of doing things. They brought into structures. And it was easy to draft people with skill into various departments to do specific tasks to foster the work of the movement. Yeah. That is something that brought. And in as much as our government has got specialized departments, I really think that we still need to, with the growth of country leadership, countries have come together, like South Africa came together and voted a coordinator. It's the same thing in Germany, it's the same thing in France, same in Spain. We are counting about 27 different regions where our people have come together and voted leadership. And I think that they should play the role of mobilization. They should mobilize beyond the current base. Yeah. You know, instead of just focusing on governance and just governing the people who are already in the revolution, we should go back to that grassroots mobilization and education, conscientization in such a way that we bring in more people who are out of the current base now, so that they can bring in their own skill, bring in their expertise, so that we can expand. I really think that is something that we should be looking into.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right. But then an area which we need to strengthen, and in fact we need to work very hard to do, is discipline. When you talk about grassroots support, when you talk about mobilization of the masses, it also goes with the discipline that comes with it. One of the major weaknesses that we have encountered so far with this revolution has been the almost total absence of discipline. And it is that lack of discipline that, for instance, would prompt an individual or individuals to bring a camera to the conclave and do a live stream of it. Anybody who understands how the conclaves were designed and were run from the very beginning, the conclave was not open to every single individual. The conclave is the meeting of leaderships. Like I've said somewhere else, the conclave is a meeting of cardinals, not a conclave, not a meeting of every priest and catechist. The moment you open it up to everybody, what you're doing is that you're putting our whole leadership in jeopardy. That is one of the few instances where you're bringing all our leaders together to sit in one room and deliberate over a certain period of time. There is the dangers. There are security dangers that come with that. There are all kinds of problems that come with that. The last thing you want is for an individual to come and do a live stream telling exactly the location and the individuals who are attending the meeting. You don't do that. That's lack of discipline. But it goes beyond that. Once somebody commits such an act, what do you do about that? No revolution has ever succeeded. On the foundation of indiscipline. So we have made a lot of progress, but I think we still have a long way to go. And until discipline becomes one of the pillars that hold our revolution, we will continue to face difficulties. And that is where civic education, political education comes in. When you talk about the Ambazonia we want to build, how do you want to see it? When you talk about the economic prospects that we put, it's also about our people. It's the human resources that we are offering to the world. And like I've said several times before, we've got a country neighbor that has got over or close to 200 million people. That's a big market. Yeah. But we need to sell ourselves to that neighbor, for the neighbor to think, oh, these people, they could be a good market for us. The same with our neighbors on the east, when eventually they become our neighbors. We're not just talking about the 18 or so million people, but we are talking about the whole of the Central African region. We will be able to service this region. But you can only do that with the masses who are well-informed, well-educated, but well-disciplined. And that has to start now. It cannot start after we've gone to Boya, then we start to say, okay, can we now? It starts now. If it doesn't start now, for sure, back to your question, we may end up like South Sudan.
Well, all right, Milan, talking about political education. Let's move now to educating our masses, because you just explained how we need to sell ourselves to our neighbors.
Yeah.
And most often than not, we talk to people about our struggle, and yet we don't tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
We all understand that in as much as self-defense is a major role player in the restoration of our independence, we also know that geopolitics play a very massive role in this. How do we sell our story to our people? What pitch do we have in that? Because it's a game of interest, and we know that the world wants to see where they will benefit.
Yeah.
Now, when we go talking to people, what do we say? What do you advise people? Because myself, I find myself in situations where I need to explain why we want an independent Ambazonia and why we think they can benefit from the independence of Ambazonia. So what advice do you have for our people? What pitch do they have to give out there so that we attract people to support us in restoring our independence completely?
I think this goes back to political education, and here you're not just talking about the masses, you're talking about everybody. I have been part of meetings where these questions have been asked, questions such as, what do you want? Why should we support you in what you want? And answers such as, no, we in 1961, our people, yes, we know the history. Yes, we understand the history. Very often, before people even sit to talk with you, they've taken the time to do their homework and understand the history. Very often, like you say, what is the need for us? We need to be able to understand the language of these kinds of negotiations, of diplomacy, and how to pitch our story. And once again, this is where we need to start interrogating our capacity to go out there and sell our story. But there are certain fundamentals that we haven't put in place. And these are some of the things that at the moment I'm more and more interested in terms of how do I contribute to the revolution. I cannot remember an instance where we have had a conversation as to what kind of country do we want to put in place. And when you say, but we don't have a political, what do you call it? Philosophy. We don't have a political philosophy. If you go to the Scandinavia, a lot of the Scandinavian countries subscribe to
social model.
Yes, a socialist model, but also they've got something which they call the law of Jante, many of them, which basically is, and that's why in a Scandinavian country you would hardly find anybody who's super wealthy and they flaunt it and they go out there and show everybody how much I've got more than you've got, because there is a belief and an understanding that you have no right to have so much while I have so little. And so they build an economy, just like the politics that says, as much as possible, they want an egalitarian society. We haven't had that kind of conversation. Some may say we want to build a socialist country. Others may say we want to have a purely capitalist country, a mixed economy. For me, these are the discussions we should be having. And when we go out there and talk to certain actors, we need to have that story right. The same goes, like I mentioned, for the kind of political education we give our people. We want to know exactly what kind of country we want to build. If we talk about the Singapore of Africa or the Dubai, but what does that mean? How do you get to that point? What do you put in place to ensure that there is good governance? Everybody, including Mr. Paul Biya, says, oh, I'm putting in place the New Deal, but what do you do to ensure that your New Deal is not just on paper, but is something that is in fact? We need to be able to build that, and I think that is something that a conversation that we haven't had enough. Here and there, every now and then, when we sit over a drink, we have that conversation, but there has been no deliberate discussion as a movement, as a new government, as a country, and as a government in exile to say, this is what we are going to do. But then again, it's a learning curve. We are learning as we're going. We're making our mistakes, and we're moving forward.
Sloganeering has become a thing in Africa, where every new politician, before they take power, they would say change, scam. I mean, you will see a lot of that in La République du Cameroon now, when the likes of Ben Muna and whoever are the candidates, they would say we are bringing change, we are bringing change. And we have seen that across Africa. We have seen that in Nigeria over the years. We have seen that in Kenya. We've seen that in Ghana. There's the preaching of change. But whenever we get to the new incumbent comes into power, what happens usually is that change is all that we see. Change of office, change of personnel. And that change never translates to action. It never translates to policy. that actually people do things that represent that change. You know, they never go past that sloganeering of change. And every now and then, like every now and then, after one term, 2 term, people start crying, we want change again, we want change. So I really think that we need to start that political education now, not yesterday. I think it will benefit me more if I'm contributing my $20 to support the interim government. And in exchange, I'm getting that political education to become a citizen. I mean, it's civics, something they taught us in passive. But this is the most important aspect of the Western world, their civics, their ideology as a people. It's taught that's the longest subject that is taught. And Americans, when you want to become an American, when you sit for a whole interview for you to understand what being an American is, that is exactly what I think we need at this moment. We need to get to a place where we refine and define what is an Ambazonian, what are the cultures of Ambazonia to be. So that's what we will pride ourselves in. It's not just we say, no, we want change because we are running away from a 35 years old regime. We are running away from 56 years of oppression. We need to be able to define what that change is and start changing ourselves now as people, the way we behave around the world. That is really going to help. So if we were meeting stakeholders now and they asked, for instance, how can you prove to me that Southern Cameroon will not become a failed state like South Sudan? And you need to pitch, what would you say? Because a lot of our people get asked this question every now and then. We were in a meeting with Raymond last week, and a lot of that came up, you know, like people are getting cold because of the failure of South Sudan. Stakeholders are getting cold. So how do we put an argument against we are not going to become South Sudan right now?
Well, I think I've just explained previously a bit of why I think that we shouldn't be afraid of becoming South Sudan, but at the same time, those things that we must not tolerate at this point, because if we do, there is a very strong risk that we may end up being that. You also mentioned sloganeering and the fact that you have change of leadership comes with a whole lot of change. One of the reasons why the South African, especially the ANC model, which very often you might find in countries like China and so on, is appealing, is because the agenda, the mandate and the agenda does not belong to an individual. It belongs to a movement. It belongs to a movement that decides what it wants, and the individual is merely the representative of the ideal that has been crafted by the whole. If you look back to the very beginning of SCACUF and how we had set it up, we had spoken about the importance of having what was called then the Leadership Council, which then became the Leadership Council, became the Governing Council and the Restoration Council and so on. That it's always important to have some kind of a body of wise men and women, of educated men and women, men with a certain level of rectitude, whose job it is to invite, to advise and direct the executive. Now, there were certain dispositions we had put in place at the time, which said, for instance, if you really want somebody to invest their time and their energy and their everything into this struggle, we need to get people who can do it full time. And for you to do that, you need to put them on a stipend, so that you don't call them in the morning and they say, oh, you know, I cannot do it because, oh, I had to go to the market to sell because my daughter needs to go to school. But we put them on a stipend which is respectable enough for them to look after their families. And we had put the individuals who are going to benefit from this, and we expected them to give in their 100%. But certain individuals would wake up one morning and say, no, we don't have to do that, we're in a revolution. But the reason why the revolution had failed for 30 years is because there were no dedicated individuals. It becomes important, therefore, that our people get schooled in these things to say, you're talking about civics, you talk about very simple things. If you talk about the Americans and the American flag, it's something that they're proud of, and that's why in front of every other house, you have people have their flags because they're proud. They sing their anthem and they put on their anthem, and it's something that they're proud of, and everybody is proud to to sing the national anthem and be part of it. We come from a culture that has disenfranchised us and beaten our brains so adult to the point where even things which are favorable to us, we are against. So you come on a program like this and the national anthem is played, and then there is a whole outcry to say, oh, who gave you the right to play the national anthem? But why do you have a national anthem? Why do you have an anthem? It is that thing that gives you the sense of patriotism. So back to civics. In South Africa, you have, for instance, what we call the national tree, which everybody knows. So the national animal that is symbolic of South Africa. Up until now, we are still battling as to whether we're going to go for the eagle or the dove, and we haven't had a conversation around that. So it is important also that in as much as we acknowledge that we have made a lot of progress, there is a lot that we haven't done. And largely we haven't done this because every time you come with ideas, which in my opinion are progressive ideas that can take us forward, because sometimes just the bird, just the symbol, the national symbol, be it a dove or an eagle, is what gives pride to the person in the deep village who has got nothing else. But when you have individuals who say, no, 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 you can't do that because, oh, that only belongs to the president, then you're in trouble. And so we are lucky that today we've got a leadership and a leader who's very open-minded and who has very, very much disengaged himself from this kind of thinking, this kind of archaic La Republic thinking that says this is how you must do and everything must be built around one individual. So, and it goes back to what you were saying. I think every movement, a movement like ours, needs to be built around a philosophy, a national philosophy to which everybody subscribes, or at least the vast majority subscribe, and to which the person who represents us, be that person a president, a prime minister, or in our case now we've got a president of an interim government. His job is not to craft policies and decide, this is how I want us to go. His job is to roll out policies that we have all agreed on. That way, and that's why I keep saying, I like the Chinese model, I like the South African model, and very much even the American model, because when you're a Democrat or a Republican, you are there as a Democrat, but you're also representing the interests of a particular group of people. These are the conversations we don't have. The background and the culture from which you come is where you have one leader who runs the country by decree. So he wakes up in the morning, he had a bad dream last night, he decides that I'm going to give you the sack, he sacks you. And that is law. So that has to change. And for that to change, we need to start having that conversation now and start changing the mindset of our people and start building our own philosophy. This would help us, back to your question, to sell our country better when we talk to prospective clients of the country that we want to put in place. They will understand that we are not just a group of people who say, oh, we want our independence, we want our country, but they're saying, we want our country because we want to make the difference. And the difference we're going to make is that this is how the country is going to look. It's going to look like this because we've put this in place to ensure that by the time we get there, we are ready. That's the kind of conversation we should be having that we are not having. And it's painful sometimes when you see a whole lot of our compatriots spend a lot more time blackmailing, sabotaging, insulting each other, whereas we could be contributing to a whole lot more towards this ideal that we want to create. Oh, thank you.
Well, guys, we've exhausted a lot of information that I'm trying to process it and get my way around it, and I'm sure our viewers are loving it. And I think we'll have Milan come here often to enlighten us more about what to expect in the new Ambazonia, and especially about our political education, because I think that is very necessary. Now, let's go back to what people are still asking our leaders in closing, so that we leave them probably with some hope, because you mentioned here in the beginning, before some other people joined us, that there's a process that may follow, and our leaders may come out of this free. Probably you can still take us through that process. And also, I just want you to, at the end of that, tell us something here. You are no more in the cabinet, and you are doing Milan. How's Milan, and where is Milan going?
Yeah. Let me start from Milan and where is Milan going. Several times, I've said this on several platforms, that sometimes when you hear individuals talk about the fact that we were here at the very beginning, and for that reason we have to be here. It is our God-given right to be here until the very end. It makes me laugh. And many times I said then, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, I said, this is a revolution, and with a revolution, you could be here today, and tomorrow you're not here. The leaders, and like I said, the ultimate leaders of this revolution have not yet surfaced, and they're emerging. And every day you will have new people emerging and playing a role. When I got into this, it wasn't something that I'd sat back and decided that, okay, I'm going to invest myself into this struggle for the next 1 year. From December of 2016 or November or December, it was always the case of, okay, I can see the way things are going and maybe I can make a little contribution. Let me jump in there and make my little contribution and then jump out and go back to my life. But every time I did, then there was something else, and I just kept giving and giving, and eventually the whole thing swallowed me up. When a scandal broke out sometime in August, or September maybe, or October, at the time I already had a discussion with then the chairman of the governing council, Sisiku AyukTabe, where I told him that, listen, come the next conclave, I intend to step down. I want to do other things. I want to go back to my life. I want to be able to just sit back and get a better perspective. And I've always likened this to the game of football. When you are a player and you're in the very center of the pitch, it's easy. You can be a good player, but you can never have a complete perspective of the pitch. And somebody who is your coach sitting on the side is able to see better what is working well and what is not working well. But even better, the person who's sitting there in the crowd, in the spectator stand, is able to see everybody, including the coach, and see everything and see what's working well and what's not working. And I think having been at the very center of this for 1 year, I just felt like it was important also that I step back. And so we had conversations, we've had several conversations, and I had indicated very clearly that I do not intend to be part of the cabinet and the government as it is, but I continue to be part of the struggle, and I'll continue to contribute in my own small way. I'm taking some time off to do other things. There are lots of projects that I had on the side that I didn't carry out because I gave 1 year completely to the struggle, and I want to take off a bit of time, not too much, to attend to all these things, and then we'll take it from there. There is always a role to play, even if it means just contributing financially. I will be, like I said, every now and then, if there is a need, I can come to a program like this. Just like the president did when he went to the US recently. He asked me to come with him, and I accompanied him and made my little contribution. That every now and then I can do, but it is also important that we give the chance and we give the opportunity to other individuals to come in and make their contribution. Like Alfred Lord Tennyson says in King Arthur, change is inevitable, change is necessary, lest a good culture corrupts the world. It doesn't matter how good you are, every now and then you need to create the space for others to come in and make their contribution. And that's how I see it. It's important also that I stay back and see and watch and also be able to learn from others. Now, your question about the situation with our leaders and where we are. It is rather unfortunate that we find ourselves where we are, but like I said, it is important also that at the back of our minds, we know, we understand that there are dangers that come with the territory. If all had gone according to the plan, we would be telling a different story, which means all 14 of us would probably not be alive as we speak. And if we were extremely lucky, we would be in some rat-infested jail of Mr. Bia, languishing. And having been dropped there, you don't know for how long you're going to be. But one thing that needs to be clear is, even if all of us got arrested tomorrow and taken, and even they got rid of us completely, it is important that our people understand that we've got 8 million leaders. And that as you get rid of 2 or 3 leaders or 14 leaders, 28 leaders surface and they take over, they emerge and they have to take over. That needs to be a message that has to stay out there. It's not only a message to our people, but it's a message to Mr. Bia and his cohorts. To the situation of our leaders, luckily, we thank God. We continue to thank God that they are still in Nigeria. We continue to thank God that Nigeria happens to be a country where the rule of law is respected, where there is at least an understanding and a practice of human rights. And as a result, we think that they are going to be given a fair hearing. Having been deprived of their legal counsel for almost 2 weeks now, having been deprived of any kind of contact even with their families, we have to deplore and to state very strongly and state this to the Nigerian government that this is very, very much not Nigeria. We expected better from Nigeria, and we are hoping that in the coming days, Nigeria will show that spirit of leadership and brotherhood that it is known, not only within Nigeria, but within the ECOWAS region, and in fact, across the African continent. Having spoken to the lawyers, my understanding is that the lawyers had recently, I think as a few days ago, they had already submitted their writ of habeas corpus, which means that they are demanding the Nigerian government to give them the right to see their clients and establish proof of life and proof of well-being. And I think in the coming days that will be the case. Moving forward, what's my analysis? Once this goes into the legal domain, there is a danger that this becomes a long-drawn process, which means the lawyers force the government to give them access. Then it becomes a process that then goes to court for that to happen. Once it goes to court, then it leaves the political to the legal domain, which means a judge comes into play. We have seen some of the spurious and very asinine accusations that have come up from the Nigerian police. We are confident that this thing is going to be thrown out of court by a reasonable judge, and that's the reason why we're not hopeful, we are confident, we are optimistic. The downside to that is that our leaders may have to spend a few weeks waiting for their day in court. But sometimes this could be a blessing in disguise. How I see this is that this now forces Nigeria and the Nigerian government to get to the very center of this issue and to play its role as our neighbor. And so out of this crisis has arisen opportunities. It becomes our responsibility to seize those opportunities and take it forward. We need to start engaging the Nigerian government on a diplomatic basis at this level. We need to start sending some of our members of cabinet to go and start engaging members of the Nigerian government and start saying on an equal basis what is going on. That has to start taking place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Milan, for sharing your perspective. It brings me back to when you were talking about you doing you, Milan, and something that you have really, craftily not been able to show in public is your profession. It was not by accident that the UN, called you as an expert in South Sudan 13 months leading up to the South Sudan's independence. It was not by accident that for years and years the UN would call you into DRC, where they have their crises and wars and all that. And it's because you're an expert in disaster management. And that is the cliff we are heading to. It's a disaster. The refugees the numbers are going to increase. You are seeing mothers and children, they are rising. And of course, the president called you to come to Nigeria and assess the situation because of your expertise. And I'm watching the comments and people are saying, no, Milan, you can't go do you. The president, his maiden speech when he became the chairman, he said, it is not going to be business as usual. It's not been business as usual for me and my business. It hasn't been business as usual for Ray and his business. And we don't want it to be business as usual for you. We are counting on you and your expertise. And South Africa needs you. I don't think we have mobilized. We look at the numbers. Arguably, there's more than 15,000 Southern Cameroonians in South Africa. We haven't reached a third of that yet. We still need to break, we need to break into that. We need to have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 registered active Ambazonians in South Africa so that we can reach critical mass. We can, encourage South Africa or motivate South Africa to look at our case more, looking at the possibility of 15,000 of us going back to Ambazonia to build our own country. It would give South Africa a breathing space. So we need you. We need you to keep on bringing your expertise, supporting the interim government. As Milan, as the expert that we know, we want you to continue playing that role and not just go back to your business and be contributing money. It's because it's the experience that God has given you. It's the experience that your career has given you. We need that. So I think our viewers will agree with me on that.
You're not taking me back to the arguments I've had with Sisiku over the past 2 months or so. I am not running away from the revolution. I think, like I mentioned, sometimes you just need to have a different perspective. It is important also that from time to time you create a space. I think that what this has done is that we have created the space for more individuals to come to the fore we did not know. This time last year, when we were engaging with this, there were lots of our compatriots who would not even shake your... I mean, if they see you coming from this side of the street, they'll cross over to the other side of the street because they didn't want to associate with you. And I can understand sometimes the bitterness and the anger that some of our compatriots who have been in the struggle for the past 32 years, they churn out because of that feeling of rejection over a long time, and then all of a sudden everybody's now embraced this thing and they don't see their place in it. But I think it's important also that we recognize and realize that leadership cannot always be from the front. Sometimes you can lead from the back, you can lead from the side, you can bring your expertise, which is why, in spite of me saying, you know what, all the long arguments I had with Sisiku and said, no, I have made up my mind, I want to do this, I want to be a private citizen of the Republic of Southern Cameroon, I still agree to go on a mission to go do an assessment, because when I see the way the situation is being handled, I know that our people are giving from their heart, they're giving their everything, but there are certain technicalities which we are not looking at. The hygiene of the people who are in these camps who've been displaced. We may run the risk of having a cholera outbreak if something is not done. So I accept to go do an assessment to give my recommendations to the government to say, listen, this is how I see it. The flip side to that is that if I were playing a senior role in government, I wouldn't be given the task to go down there and do those things that I do. In South Africa, you know it got to a point where, and you know how South Africa is designed, it got to a point where South Africa said, we are going to recall you because you have been deployed by South Africa to go serve our people. When the time comes, we're going to ask you to step down. That is how we operate. So you listen to the voice of the people, but you also listen to yours. I am not taking forever off the struggle. There are a few things I need to set in place. There are a few things I want to do, but also I just want to be able to sit back for a couple of months and see how things go, because it gives me a better perspective. Like I keep saying, it doesn't matter how good the culture, we need to ensure that it doesn't corrupt the world.
I just want to ask, are you taking a position of a coach or of a spectator?
Oh, I am a very, very active player on the reserve bench.
So we just want to thank Mr. Milan and our viewers for a wonderful evening again on Afro Perspective. Thank you for coming, Milan. Obviously, with you having the free time, we would want to bring you more and more onto the platform to talk more about your expertise and how you can help specific, areas, especially the disaster areas, the refugees. I get scared at times when I look at the numbers, when I look at the pictures and I see women and children, I get scared. So we will try to bring you as much as possible onto Amber Perspective to speak to that specifically, something that you are an expert in. And obviously, we will, a lot of our shows on SCBC, they want to bring you on, so we hope that you would be generous enough to come up as much as possible to share your perspective and keep on educating our people. I mean, education is just with this struggle that we have realized that education is not just going to school to learn how to read and write. It goes way beyond that, and we thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Milan, thank you very much for coming. And I want to tell our viewers, the next interview will be in our pidgin. All this English, we'll cut out that Derek Sabi over talk English. Yeah, Milan will talk about pidgin that day. So we don't want to say we don't talk English over today. So next interview we get them. If Milan come on board, we'll talk that interview that day completely in pidgin, because we know say a lot of our parents, they're back at home, right in the hinterlands, they watch this channel and they like for hear it the way we talk. And when we only talk now this Queen's language, some of them didn't understand. So yeah, probably when we get our next interview in Milan,
yes,
we would like to break and down for pidgin so that people will hear the people the way they really need to hear the message. They go hear, because now we talk about people they don't go to school or one they be literate enough to understand. We so you'll find the next interview. Maybe we try. Derek, I hope so you do with me in this one.
I get pidgin interview tomorrow, by the way.
Oh yeah.
With Ask Doctor.
Yeah. Dr. Gasa gets an interview with Milan tomorrow. That one a pure pigeon. That one Dr. Gasa pigeon himself bad past my own. So any person where you want hear pigeon, correct pigeon, that one will come out drive for under belay tomorrow.
Now you go talk.
Now you Milan and ask question.
Yes, ask question.
Host the Dr. Gasa for Germany. Yeah.
So in a few moments we will be having our Undersecretary of State for Communication, Mr. Milton Taka, coming up to give our people the updates. Like Milan has said, it's good that we stick to one source of information, and it's our spokespersons in the Undersecretary of Communications, Mr. Milton Taka, and the Secretary of Communications, Mr. Chris Anu. We should stick to that as our source of information, especially in these trying times, to avoid the confusion that is out there. You should wait when they come up and speak, and then you take that for what is the position of government instead of the opinions out there. We want to thank our viewers so much for spending the 2 hours with us, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. We are looking forward to another special edition on Saturday with another special guest. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thank everybody. And when Derek, soon we don't leave our viewers, they need to call the studio anymore. So you will find, say, when we get an interview like this, a lot of people in there all day, they want to talk to the guest. You will find, say, next time we try to open the lines. And I think most often that because our lines they be bad from home. They like Republic, they play with our signals and our lines so much that we need to get our people to call in. And so we'll work on and we'll see call on people to donate so that we will get a better equipment. Because sometimes even our equipment, we need equipment because of about $20,000 or $2,000. Yeah. About $2,000. So any person really listen, we want to give you equipment for use and for make calls to studio. $2,000. If we donate them to ACBC, we go buy that equipment and we will get better calls. Even if the Republic try to play around for block our calls, we will still find a way around for make them maybe clearer and clear enough for everybody to understand. So we want to thank Milan again, and we hope say we'll extend more invitations for you to come to the studio. And again, we thank our brother for the beautiful studio. I mean, Milan come for they will start our new studio. Yeah, so you'll be special for come. You see how beautiful people all comment the studio. So I hope our brother will design this studio to watch, and so that he will get that fulfillment. Because not only when I thank you for they give you that fulfillment, because now for free they do all these designs and making us look good on set. So we want to thank you again once more, and we extend all the thank you for you, so that he will continue to do the great work we do for ACBC and for the struggle.
All right. Enjoy your evening and watch out for the Undersecretary for Communications in a moment.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Them they beat us, them they kill us, I say them they wound us, Southern Cameroon. Southern Cameroon, not for Bamen that way, yeah, they. Southern Cameroon, not for man fair with me, I go pass. Southern Cameroon, not for boya with me, I go lewa. Southern Cameroon, not for kumba with me, I go stay.
You work at all. You don't get no problem, they shoot you for that door. For that door, right for that door.
Not for Mutengene, not for Mamfe, not for Tombo, not for Mwa, not for Umbe, not for Limbe, not for, yeah. Where the freedom is, where them they beat us like this, yeah. Where the future of our kids, where them they brutalize us like this for streets. Where them good roast them day, where money walk out from Kumba to Mamfe. Where the promises them day, where picking up we go send to school. I know say pay battle, therefore this level me, I don't know. Jaka de folewa, police enter rape and swear, I don't know. Them the whip students, them with sticks. Them the slap lawyers, them for streets. Them they follow we, they drag we.
They molest we, they crack we like say we thief. Them they bring us, they carry us, they go. Them they match we, they turn we for months. Them they throw away we crashing water for skip now. Them they flow we with gas them for house. Hey, Southern Cameroon, not for Bamen that way, yeah they. Southern Cameroon, not for man fair with me, I go pass. Southern Cameroon, not for boya with me, I go lewa. Southern Cameroon, not for kumba with me, I go stay. The pain is too much, we cannot take it, no more. Make una leave we go survive. We are living in fear. All the bad people make una hear. Them say them go do this, go do that. They promise and fail. This time you don't fail. Them they mash we, they turn we for months. Them they throw away we crashing water for skin out. Them they flow we with gas them for house. Hey, Southern Cameroon, not for Bamen that way, yeah they. Southern Cameroon, not for man fair with me, I go pass.